Welcome everyone to the Community Income Tax Preparation Intermediate Return webinar. It is 1:56. We are going to give everybody time to get logged in and we will start promptly at 2 p.m. Once again, welcome to Community Income Tax Preparation Intermediate Tax Return webinar. It is 1:58, and for anyone who's just joined, we are going to give everyone time to get logged in and we'll start the webinar promptly at 2 p.m.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us on this training webinar. This is Omar Kanda with CIT. I just wanted, before we get started on the training and give it over to Ellen, just wanted to touch base with all the attendees here today and just let you know, if you have questions or concerns about the EPS change, please give me a call directly. My extension is 101 at CIT. We do feel like it's going to be a huge upgrade over what we had before, and nothing's changing with the pricing, so everything's getting going to be much better. So I know that sometimes when there's a switch, people can, get a little nervous about it, but I can assure you that this is the right decision that we're making here. And, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. Anyways, I won't hold you guys anymore. Ellen, please take over the training. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Omar. Okay, everybody, welcome again. Today, what we're going to be covering is going to be tax preparation of an intermediate tax return. So in last week's, we did a basic, W-2, answered some healthcare questions, things like that. In this session, what we're going to cover is we're going to look at a taxpayer who has income from a W-2, but also had their own business. So they had their own little cleaning business on the side. We're also going to look at the Schedule C that's going to be associated with that. We'll jump right into the program and we'll get started. Before we do so, though, I do want to go ahead and remind everyone that during the webinar, everyone is in a muted state. But if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in your GoToWebinar console down towards the bottom. You have the questions taskbar there that you can ask any question that you have during the presentation. Alexis will be on the webinar with us, and she'll be answering questions throughout the webinar. And then at the end, we will answer some of those questions live so everyone can hear them, because if one person has that question, then I'm sure someone else does too. So we want to make sure that we're answering as many as we can. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump over to the program. So once you're inside the program, to start a new return, there's several different ways you can do so. You can click on the Returns tab here and click New Return. Or if you're on your dashboard screen, you can also click New Return from here as well. This return is a return that I have already started. So I'm just going to go back to my tax returns and actually open up the return that I want to continue with. So once you have your taxpayer sit down in front of you, you want to start the tax return by clicking on New Return. Now, when you do so, just to show you, once you click on New Return, it'll bring up the Create New Return dialog box. Here's where you're going to enter in the social, and it wants you to confirm it. And it does this for obvious reasons. We want to make sure that we're entering in that Social Security number correctly. So once you enter it in the first time, just to show you, and you tab away, it's going to block out the number because it doesn't want you to look at that number that you just keyed in, because maybe you keyed that in incorrectly. So it wants you to look at the paper or the Social Security card that you have in front of you and re-enter that social. So once I re-enter a social, and I'm going to make this wrong just to show you what happens, and if I don't have them incorrectly and I hit go to tax forms or go to interview, either one, if it's incorrect, you'll see it's going to tell you that they must match. So until you get the Social Security number correct, it's not going to let you continue. So now let's put in the correct Social Security number. And then when we click on go, it will then take you into either the tax forms or the interview, whatever you chose. So again, I'm just going to go back and I'm going to open up the return that we're going to be working in. So once you go into the program, just to give you some info on your workspace here, you're going to have your Refund Monitor here, and as you're entering in the information, it will start calculating their refund amount or balance due. You also have the return summary if you wanted to see more detailed information, because here it only is going to show you the federal refund or balance due. But if you wanted to see more information, you can click on return summary and it'll give you all the demographic information, their federal income, and if there's a state attached, it would give you that as well. It also gives you the e-file status information. So when it was created, has it been sent to the IRS? And then also here, if you've attended any of our administrator settings webinars, you know that you have different return stages that you can create those stages. And a lot of our offices, their preparers are not allowed to electronically file the return because once it's complete, it goes to somebody who actually reviews the return. So once they complete it, and if they wanted to let the reviewer know that this return is ready to be reviewed, you can have that in your return stage and they can select that, and then the reviewer can go to the tax return screen where it displays all the tax returns and can sort it by this status and know exactly what tax returns they need to review. Below that, you have your loaded forms. So this is what we call the forms tree. It's going to show you any and all forms that are currently loaded in the tax return. Now, as you're completing the tax return, if you mark certain things and you're answering certain questions, the program will automatically load more forms. If the program does not load the form that you need, you can always add it yourself. So if you need to add a form, underneath the loaded forms, you see you have a plus and a minus sign. To add a new form, simply click on the plus sign and it will bring up the Add a Form screen dialog box. You can click here and show all forms and it'll display any and all forms that you can add to the tax return. But if you know the form name or number that you're looking for, you can always type that in the search field. So for example, I know that they're going to have dependent care on this return, and I know that that goes on a form 2441. I could come in here and simply type 2441, and I could add the form that way as well. Then in the big work area, it's going to show you the form that you are currently landed on. So this is the form you're currently working on. Over here beside your loaded forms, you see these arrows buttons. It will take you to the next form in your tree, so you can navigate through your tax return that way. When you're completing your tax return, you always want to complete the main information sheet first. This information will carry over to all the forms, so you're not rekeying information more than one time. You'll enter in the taxpayer's name, and that will carry over to all forms that it needs to carry over to. So really, this screen is going to grab a lot of the demographic information, the name, their address, telephone numbers, banking information if they're going to be getting a direct deposit product, things like that. So we'll just go ahead and begin. So first thing that probably pops out to you is there's some red fields. If you see any field that's red, just know that that is a required field. Something has to be inserted in that field. So this is a field that's required for electronic filing purposes. So for this example, we're going to be doing Susan Q. Smith's tax return. And you'll notice as I'm entering in information, other fields become required because I've put information in somewhere else. It now requires that field to become a field that you must input information into. So you'll notice that the Social Security number is automatically there because when you keyed it in to start the return, it pulls in from that information. If it was a married filing joint return, of course, you would fill in the spouse information. In this example, it's just going to be a head of household return. Like I said, she's going to have income from a W-2. She also had her own side business where she was cleaning offices on the weekends. She's going to have a dependent, and that dependent's going to qualify for earned income credit, the child tax credit, and she also pays daycare expenses. So we'll also have dependent care that we'll enter in the information for. Next, you're going to want to come down and put in the mailing address. Where does this taxpayer live? Once you enter in that information, you'll notice it bypasses the city and state, and it's going to take you directly to the zip code field. This field once you enter in the info here, it will automatically populate the city and the state for you. If we can save you those precious keystrokes, we're going to do so. The more keystrokes you can save, the quicker you're getting your tax returns completed. The faster you can get through a tax return, the more tax returns you can get completed during a day. The next field we're going to enter in is going to be telephone numbers. Depending on how they're going to file the tax return, if they're getting a bank product, these numbers are required. So you want to make sure you're capturing that information, not only for that purpose, but also for your records as well. If they have a different evening number, you would want to enter one for that as well. The next field that's required is going to be the date of birth, and this is for federal tax purposes. They may qualify for certain things if they're over a certain age. So once you enter in their date of birth, it will automatically calculate the age for you. Occupation is going to be the next required field, so you want to enter in what they do. In this example, we're going to say that she is a salesperson. And then you can navigate through these fields multiple different ways. You can use your tab key and it'll take you to the next field. I find that it's easy for me to simply scroll through. And of course, I'm going to look through and answer anything that's required or anything that I know I need to answer. So the next required is going to be the filing status. So how are they filing their tax return? Well, in this example, she is a single mother who has taken care of her dependent all year long by herself. So I know that she's going to be able to file as head of household. So once I mark head of household, you'll notice that this field becomes required. But before you put anything in here, you can simply scroll down to the dependent section and enter it there. This is if it was a qualifying child that was not their dependent. So next, let's go down and complete the dependent information. So of course, you've got to put in the dependent's name, and this is little Susie Q. And her date of birth is going to be May 5th, 2012. Again, this is very important, especially when it comes to dependents. The program will automatically calculate the age. Why is this important? Well, if they are going to be getting EIC or child tax credit, or even dependent care for that example, the age is very, very important because we all know that if they're under the age of 17 or over the age of 18, but younger than 24, they should automatically qualify. But if they are over the age of 18 and maybe they're a full-time student, they can still qualify for earned income credit. So it's really important that the program displays the age. Then you want to put in their social security number. How is this child related to you? Son, daughter, niece, nephew, aunt? You just want to put in the appropriate. For this example, we're going to say it's a daughter, and you'll notice I just typed in D, and it narrows my pick list down. Again, this is a time-saving feature. So once it's on daughter, I can simply hit enter, and it'll put it in, or just tab away. Well, I hit enter. Let's go back and try that again. It narrows it down, and I can simply hit my toolbar down or select it, and it'll put it in for me. Eventually, there we go. Months in the home. So how long did this dependent live with the taxpayer? Well, in this example, she had the dependent 12 months. Now, even if it is a newborn baby and that baby was born December 31st of last year, they can still claim that dependent for 12 months. I don't care what time of year the child was born. If it was born to them and it's the first year they're claiming the dependent, you would still put in 12 months. Then you want to put in the dependent code. How is this dependent code qualify with you? Was it a child that lived with you? Did this child not live with you due to divorce or separation? All other dependents, or was this a non-dependent? Now, of course, depending on what you select here is depending on whether or not you're going to qualify for any of these different exemptions, like the dependent care, the EIC, or the child tax credit. Well, for this example, it was a dependent that lived with the taxpayer all year long. Now, I know because the taxpayer has handed me her forms, but she did pay in $1,500 for dependent care. So I want to go ahead and mark that. And what I want to show you, to put a check mark in it, you can use your space bar and hit it, and it'll automatically check mark it for you. Or you can simply click on the field and it will put the check mark in it. Completely up to you on how you want to navigate through. But now once I tab away, you'll notice that it automatically loads my 2441. So this is an example of, as I'm entering in information, how the program will automatically load those forms for you. Now I also know that we're going to get earned income credit because she qualifies. She had enough of income low enough to qualify for it. The dependent lived with her. She took care of this dependent all 12 months. No one else helped her. So we do know that she is able to qualify for the earned income credit. Based on the age and the relationship, the code, it automatically calculated the child tax credit for you automatically. So now we're just going to keep scrolling down. And the next is going to be state information. So if they lived in a state that has a state income tax, you want to go ahead and put that information in here. So you would put the state abbreviation, and once you do, the program will load those forms for you. What type of return is this going to be? Is it going to be a bank product return where they're going to get their money and your fees will come out of that product? Are they doing an e-file only? If it is just an e-file only, keep in mind you want to make sure you're getting your fees up front because there's nothing coming out of the tax return. If it is a bank product, below that is where you would select EPS as your bank. If they're doing a direct deposit product, this is where you would put in their routing number and their account number. Now, keep in mind, the program does have a checklist when it comes to the routing number. So if it's not valid, it's going to let you know that. Okay, so if I just try to put in a number here and it's not a valid one, you can see how the program will pop and say, hey, that's not a valid number, because we program it into the program that this is the valid range on routing numbers. And if it's outside that range, the program will let you know. But once you put in a correct one, and hit enter, you can see how it will take it. It'll accept it for you. And then all you have to do is enter in the account number. But we're not going to be doing a direct deposit product. I just want to be able to show you guys how the program knows if it's valid or not. The next is going to be the PINs. How are they going to file it? The most used method is going to be the Practitioner Pin Method. So you can have this in your setup. As you can see, mine's all automatically pulled in for me. My PIN as the ERO, and I have it check marked that we're going to be using the Practitioner Pin Method. If you do not use the Practitioner Pin Method, you're going to be selecting one of these methods. If you go with one of these, you have to know the taxpayer's prior year AGI, or they have to know the PIN that they used last year. If not, it will get rejected. So keep that in mind. The easiest to use is going to be the Practitioner Pin. And again, this is going to be set up in your defaults or your when you're setting up your program. That way you don't ever have to enter it. It's automatically marked for you. Next is going to be their consent. So this is because we marked up here the Practitioner Pin. I can go ahead and enter in the taxpayer's PIN myself. If it's not the Practitioner Pin and it's using one of these, you actually have to give the keyboard to the taxpayer and they have to enter in their own PIN. The only thing that I need to do here is put in today's date. You'll notice that the ERO information is automatically pulled in for me. I also have it in my default set up for a spouse as well, but you'll notice because there's not a spouse associated, it's not required, so it doesn't pull in any of the information. And when the forms print, it will print blank, so you don't have to worry about that. So the next required field is going to be how you verified their identity. You have several different options, but because most of the time they're providing you probably a driver's license, if not maybe a state ID. So you see I have it marked that they've provided a state ID or driver's license. And the only thing that I need to enter in is going to be their driver's license ID number. So I'm looking right at their driver's license and entering in that info. Then only thing else we need is going to be their date that the driver's license was issued and the expiration date. And again, the expiration date. And then you're moving on to your next section. And because I live in the state of Georgia, you can see in my defaults, I went ahead and defaulted the state to Georgia because I know 99% of my clients are going to be from the state of Georgia. I can enter that. Now, if you're in an area that you have where you're filing returns from people who live all over, you do not have to default it. You can enter it in each time that you create a tax return. Then it wants to know the proof level of how you verified their identity. Most of the time, they're in person in your office. So you can see in my defaults, I marked it to default it to in person. They were in possession of their valid primary government picture ID. Again, you do not have to default. It just saves time. Saving those precious seconds in each tax return, you're going to get through them a lot quicker. If they were a victim of identity theft and the IRS had issued them a PIN, this is where you would enter in the PIN for the taxpayer or spouse. Below that, my prepare information is pulled in automatically. And you can see now that my main information sheet has the green check mark beside it. So I know that this form is now complete. There's several different ways you can complete a tax return. You can go to your 1040. A lot of people who preparers who have been in the industry a long time are more comfortable by doing this. Feel free. You can go straight down your 1040 and work and link to all the forms that you need. So for example, you know wages is going to go back to box 7. You could go to your box 7 and you can click on the little arrow beside the field. Once you do so, it will bring you up some options. The very top one you can see looks like a chain link from a chain link fence or just a chain. That is your linking feature. If you click on this, it will show you any forms that have already been linked to this field or any forms that you can select to complete that will link back to this field. So once I click on it, it'll display. So right now we can see the 2 forms that have already been inputted into my tax return are listed here. But if I needed to add something new, I could click on this new tab and it will show me any and all forms that the info links back to this line for. So for this example, it's a W-2 that we have the information for. So I'm just going to simply click on the W-2 that I already have loaded. Now it's not completed, but we're going to complete it at this time. So you'll notice the employee's name is already there, that pulled over from our main info sheet along with the Social Security number. Up at the top, you can specify whether or not it's a taxpayer or spouse. You see it's not required for this one because it is a head of household return. There's only one taxpayer on this tax return. So I went ahead and marked it for the taxpayer. The next required field is going to be check if the taxpayer address is shown correctly on the W-2. So if this is the address that is on the paper W-2 you have in hand, you would check this top box. If it's not, let's say for example that the taxpayer's recently moved and the W-2 has a different address, You can click here to make changes. We're going to say in this example that it is correct, and we can move on. The next required is going to be the EIN. Now, this is the heads down data entry. You're looking at your W-2 you have in hand, and you're entering in the information into the program. Doesn't get any easier than that. But we also put in time-saving features. So we do have an employer ID database. So once you enter in a employer identification number, if someone else comes to your office that works the same place and you enter in that employer ID number, the program's going to automatically fill out the information below, saving you keystrokes. So once I enter in the EIN here, and I hit tab or enter, you can see that it automatically pulled in. I don't know why it didn't bring in the employer's name. It should have, but it fills out all this information for you, saving you those keystrokes. And so now once we put in the employer ID, you'll notice that now the wages field has become a required field. Again, you're looking right at your W-2 and you're entering in the information from it. Now, I'd like to show you this at the same time. If the W-2 has cents in it, the program will automatically round it up or round it down for you. So if I put in 49 cents, it's going to round it down, so it'll stay at the 14,852. If I had something above 49, you can see that the program will automatically round it up for you. Then you just, again, entering in the information that's on your W-2. And boxes 3, 4, 5, and 6 automatically calculate for you based on the wages that you enter. Sometimes these fields are different. So I always say, make sure once you enter in this information that you verify box 3, 4, 5, and 6 is exactly the same as what's on the W-2, okay? Because sometimes a good example of this is if they paid into a 401k. If they did contribute to a 401k, these boxes will be different a lot of times. So just make sure that they are correct. If they're not, you can see you have check to take calculations off lines 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if they are different and you need to change them, you can simply put a check mark here. Then you can go down and make the changes manually. Now I'm going to put in the state information. So again, I'm looking at my W-2, and the only thing that I need to enter in is going to be their withholdings that they had for the state of Georgia. And again, it's going to be on the W-2. So, I mean, really heads down data entry. It automatically pulls in the federal wages from box 1 for you, so you do not have to enter that. The only thing that you do have to enter would be the state ID number, and their state tax withheld. And now you can see we have a green check mark beside our W-2, so it lets us know that that W-2 is completed. So that's one way of going through a tax return. But maybe you have newer preparers in your office. And if that is the case, you can have it set up to where when you start or when they start a tax return, that an interview sheet will automatically load when they start a new return. Again, they complete their main info first, then they can go to their interview sheet. And what this does for them is it gives them the ability to interview the taxpayer. Okay, so they're asking questions. Okay, how did you earn your income? Did you have a W-2? Was it from wages, things like that? If that's the case, they simply put a yes beside it, and the program would load a W-2 for them. Okay, we also know that on this particular tax return that she had a side business. So did they have self-employment or operation of a business? If they mark that yes, then your Schedule C will load automatically. They don't have to know that it goes on Schedule C. Once they mark that, the program adds that form for them. Okay, we also know that they have dependent care. So we want to scroll down through here and you want to find dependent care. Once you find that they do have dependent care, you see here it's 52. I simply mark that to a yes, and the program will load that 2441 for us. So that's another way that they can go through and add these forms. So you can see in our tree, it's nice and colorful right now. Our green forms with the check mark, it lets us know that they're complete. Anything red with an exclamation point beside it is stuff that we need to go in as a form we need to go in and complete. So we can start at the top and work our way down. So on the 1040 worksheet, it simply wants to know as if you claimed child tax credit on your 2016 income, was it reduced or disallowed for any reason? If it was, you would answer yes. If it's not, you simply answer no. But if it was disallowed, you have to complete form 8862 and it has to be filed along with the tax return. The next form, you can see now it's check marked off, so we've answered everything that's required to be answered. So I'm sure you can see the theme here is get the red out. That's what you want to do. Once all of our forms are green and check marked off, we can move on to our next form. So next is going to be ACA, Affordable Care. So how did they have insurance? Did they get it through the marketplace? Was it provided through an employer? Very first question, did the taxpayer's spouse or any dependent receive insurance through the marketplace? Well, for this example, she had her job, so she was able to get her insurance through her job. So we're going to say no, she didn't get it through the marketplace. It was provided through her employer. Was the taxpayer's spouse or any dependent granted marketplace exemption, or do you want to apply for? This example, no. Again, she was covered through her employer. So next is going to be, you have to do this for both the spouse and the taxpayer and the dependent, excuse me. They had minimal essential coverage, or did they not? You're marking the appropriate. So for this example, they had the coverage for both. And then once we answer those, again, you can see green check mark. So really, when you're completing a tax return, you want to start off with, of course, your main information sheet. That flows to all the forms. It keeps you from having to rekey information. Then, if it's a newer preparer and you want them to work off the interview sheet, have them go to the interview sheet. Then you want to do any income. You can see we've already added our W-2. Our W-2 has been completed. And if we go back now to our page 1 of our 1040 and we look at line 7, you can see that information is linked in, so it's flown to the correct field that it needs to go to. Now we want to complete any other income. So we also know that she had her own business. So on the weekends, she was cleaning offices, things like that for extra income. So we would want to complete our Schedule C. So we would go to page 1, and the very first thing is going to be what type of business is she doing? What is she offering? What's her product? You also have a business code. So I always suggest starting out locating the business code. So we know she does cleaning services. To get to the list of business codes, you want to come up and click on the little question mark that's in a circle in the top right-hand corner. Once you do that, it's going to know what are you needing help with. So for this example, we're just going to say we need some program help. And once we click that, it'll take us into the table of contents. Now you can look down through here and you'll see the very bottom one says Irs Codes. Once you click on that and select Irs Codes again, it's going to bring you up a list. So what codes are you looking for? The very top one is going to be the business codes for a Schedule C or Schedule CEZ. So once you click that, it will display all the different business codes that you can use. Now, I know in years past, a lot of preparers like to just use all nines. Well, the IRS said, no, 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 we don't like that. So they really want you to use the appropriate code. So you can see they have it in different links where if you click on that, it will take you to that section. So we know she offers services. So I'm just going to come down through here and look. And here's janitorial services. It's kind of what she does. She does a cleaning service. She goes in, she cleans the offices on the weekends, things like that. So what I do is normally just copy and paste. So I can highlight the business code. Not all of them. Here we go. And I'm going to use my shortcut key, which is Control-C on my keyboard. And once I go back over to my Schedule C, I can simply go to that field and hit Control-V and paste it. Now I know exactly what it is. So it's going to be for janitorial services. Next is going to be a business name. What's the name of her business? If they don't have a name, you can leave it blank. So you can notice that it's not a required field. Then their accounting method, cash, accrual, or other. This example is going to be cash. So we would simply select cash. Did they materially participate in the operation of this business during the year? If you mark no, losses are limited. So they have to have participated in order to get more of the loss advantages. So for this example, yes, she did. And did you make any payments in 2017 that would require you to file a Form 1099? And for this example, we're going to say no. So the next is going to be the income. So how much did she make for gross receipts or sales? You're just totaling that up and entering that figure here. So for this example, we're going to say she earned $12,000. So this is going to be any of the income part. So how many returns or allowances? You're just going to come through and complete these as you go. Now, once I hit enter, it will total all these up and put the gross income on box 7 for you. Next is going to be expenses. So any expenses she had running her company, advertising expenses, mileage on a vehicle if she's driving a personal vehicle, things like that. This is where part 2, you're going to come in and enter that information. So we're going to say she did pay advertising costs. She ran a radio advertisement. Also, she had door hangers that she put out. So we're going to total those two up. I'm going to say she had $650 in advertising. Now, car truck expenses, if she is claiming the mileage that she drove to these locations, you'll notice that it's green. That lets you know that you can't just do a direct entry here. You need to link it to somewhere else. So once I hit the arrow beside that field, I click on the link icon, and it'll show me where I can enter this information. So it's going to be on page 2 of my Schedule C. So once I click on that, it'll take me to that screen, and I want to go down to part 4, vehicle information. And it wants to know, the first thing is, when was this vehicle placed in service? So when did she start using this vehicle for this business? So we're going to say, for this example, at the beginning of the year. Next is going to be mileage, the total business miles, total commuting miles, and other. Now, the only thing that she's going to be able to claim is going to be business miles. As much as we all wish we could claim commuting miles, we can't. But let's say, for example, she goes to her office, gathers her cleaning supplies, then she goes to the job. Those miles from the office to the job would be considered business mileage that she can claim. So for this example, we're going to say she had 1,250 in business miles. So 1,250 miles. Commuting miles, she had 5,000. And we're not putting in anything in other. You'll know they're not required. Now it says put a check mark here to calculate the business mileage at the standard rate. So this will apply. She will get the standard rate for this. So I'm going to put a check mark here. And then you have the 3 questions. Was the vehicle available for personal use? Well, I'm sure it was. So we're going to say yes. Do you or your spouse have another vehicle available for personal use? Yes, they did. And do you have evidence to support this deduction? Yes. And if you answer yes, is this written? You must answer all of these questions. Once you complete that, we can go back to our schedule. We'll see page 1. And as you can see here, it pulls in the information for us automatically. So you can see she's getting $669 that's being credited to her for those miles that she drove that car for that business. Any other expenses that she's had that she's incurred from running the business, you can put in here. Any meals, if she's had meals out. Utilities, if she's paying a utility bill for an office somewhere. All that would go in here. If they have other miscellaneous things, for example, her cleaning supplies, things like that, at the bottom of your page 2, you have other expenses that you can come in here and type these individual expenses out. So for this example, we're going to say that she did have cleaning, chemicals, and we're going to say she had $500 on it, and then cleaning supplies, mops, brooms, trash bags, things like that, anything that she used to run her business. And then once you enter all those in, again, they will carry back to the appropriate fields on page 1. So other expenses carried over from line 48. So you see those other expenses are displayed here on line 27. So we need to put in the address, business address. I skipped that part. And again, it's got the zip code locator, so it's saving you those keystrokes for the city and the state. And so now we've completed our Schedule C. So now we just want to come down through here and get the red out of all of our forms. So next is going to be the EIC worksheet. This is going to be finding out whether or not she does qualify to get the earned income credit. So we all know we have to do our due diligence. The IRS is very, very critical of this and checks each one of these returns. And when we know last year they withheld paying out EIC returns because they're verifying the information. So you want to make sure you are doing your due diligence and asking each and every one of these questions. So the first that are required, you can see there, they have the red, is to, does the taxpayer and the spouse, if they were filing jointly, have a Social Security number that allows him or her to work or is valid for EIC purposes. Some folks are actually filing a return with an ITIN, which is just a identification number. They don't have a social. So yes, this example is they did have a Social Security number, so we can say yes. Next is going to be question 4. Was the taxpayer or spouse a non-resident alien for any part of the year? No, they weren't. Then, could the taxpayer be a qualifying child for another person? So was the taxpayer being filed as a qualifying child on their parents' return? No, they weren't. No one else is claiming this taxpayer, so we're going to say no, and it lets you know that you can go ahead and continue on. So next is going to be the questions about the dependent. You know, is either of the following true? Is the child unmarried? Or is the child married and can be claimed as the taxpayer's dependent and is not filing a 2017 joint tax return? So for this example, yes, they were unmarried. This was a young child, so we would answer yes. Did the child live with the taxpayer in the United States for over half the year? Yes, they did. Do you or the taxpayer know of another person who could claim the child for EIC purposes? So if could the father claim them and get the EIC? That's basically what it's asking. In this example, no, there was nobody else that could claim this dependent for EIC purposes. So again, you're just going through, you're reading the questions, and you're getting the information directly from the taxpayer. Does the qualifying child have a Social Security number that allows him or her to work and is valid for EIC purposes? Yes, they did. Yes, this dependent did, so we're answering yes. Once you come through and you complete everything, you'll see that, again, your form will check mark off green. If you took EIC on your 2016 income tax return, was the earned income credit reduced or disallowed? Kind of the same question we answered a while ago. No, it was not. So they don't have to have Form 8862. Now you can see we have our green check mark, so it lets us know that that form is completed. So now I'm moving on to the child dependent care expenses. So we said that the dependent care, she paid in $1,500 to daycare for the year. So again, you'll put in the care provider's name. So if it was a daycare, you're entering in the daycare name, or if it was just an individual, you would enter in the individual name. So we're going to say this is ABC Daycare. You would put in the street. Again, you have your zip code locator, so once you hit enter, it will automatically put it in the city and state for you. Then it wants to know what type of number are you entering in here. If it's a daycare, it's going to be an EIN more than likely. If it's an individual, it would be a social more than likely, unless she has incorporated and got an EIN herself. So for this example, we're going to check mark that it's an EIN, and we're going to put in her EIN number. And then you want to put in the amount paid. So this is where you would put in how much they paid for the entire year. For this example, we said she paid in $1,500. You'll notice that it carries it down to the appropriate fields for you, but underneath Part 2A, it shows the qualifying dependent. It pulls it in from the main information sheet for you along with the Social Security number. But then it wants you to enter in how much they paid in again. So once you put in the $1,500 again, the form is now complete, and we're able to move on to our next form. So now we're coming to our 8867, and this is the due diligence. We've completed our EIC worksheet, but now this is where we're going to come in and answer all the due diligence questions that we need to answer for each tax return that has earned income credit for it. So basically, it's wanting to know who provided you the information, how did you obtain it? If you obtained it from the taxpayer, or was it reasonably obtained by yourself? So most of the time, the taxpayer's sitting right there in front of you, so you did obtain it from the taxpayer. So of course, you're answering it appropriately, but for this example, we're saying that we got it from the taxpayer. Then it wants to know, did you satisfy the knowledge requirement? To meet the knowledge requirement, you must do both of the following: interview the taxpayer, ask questions, get the documents, document any responses that the taxpayer gives you to determine their eligibility. If you have met this, you simply answer, yes, we did. Did any information provided by the taxpayer, a third party, or reasonably known to you in connection with preparing the tax return appear to be incorrect or incomplete? No, everything seemed to be fine. Did you satisfy the record retention? So we all know that for earned income credit, you have to obtain certain documents for 3 years, and it lets you know that. So did you satisfy the record retention requirement? To meet the record retention requirement, you must keep a copy of the documentation referenced in 4B. So keep all of that, a copy of the 8867, and a copy of any applicable worksheets, a record of how, when, and from whom this information was obtained from. to prepare the 8867. So you need to keep a copy of all of that. Then you can, once you say yes, that we did satisfy this information, and then you have the ability to label out any documents you've gathered this information from, Social Security cards, birth certificates, school records, whatever you're using to verify the information. Did you ask the taxpayer whether he or she could provide documentation to substantiate eligibility for and the amount of the credits claimed on the return if he or she return is selected for audit? Yes, we did. So we're coming through and we're just going to answer all the questions based on how your interview is going with your taxpayer. Did you ask the taxpayer if any of these credits were ever disallowed or reduced in previous years? If the credits were disallowed or reduced, go to question 7A. If not, we're going to go on to 8. So for this example, it was not disallowed. And now we'll go to 8. If the taxpayer is reporting self-employment income, did you ask questions to prepare a complete and correct Schedule C? Yes, we did. Moving on to page 2, you can see once we completed our page 1, our page 2 is now required fields that we have to enter on it as well. Have you determined that the taxpayer is in fact eligible to claim the EIC for the number of children from whom the EIC is claimed, or to claim the EIC if the taxpayer has no qualifying children? Yes, we have. Did you explain to the taxpayer that he or she may not claim EIC if the taxpayer has not lived with the child for over half the year? Yes, we did explain that. Did you explain to the taxpayer the rules about claiming EIC? Yes, we have. Due diligence for returns with child tax credit or the ACTC credit. Did all children from whom the taxpayer is claiming this credit reside with the taxpayer? Yes, they did. Have you determined that the taxpayer has not released the claim to another person? Yes, we have. And again, we're scrolling. Did you certify that all the answers on the 8867 are, to the best of your knowledge, true, correct, and complete? Yes, we did. So now you can see our due diligence have been completed, and now our forms are check marked off. So now we're complete with the federal portion. You see the price list, and we'll come back to it and look at this when we're wrapping up the tax return. But now we need to complete the state forms. So we're going to look at our Georgia 500, page 1. And on this form, everything pretty much carries over from the federal forms. The only thing on this page is it's going to ask you, has their address changed from last year's tax return? So if when they filed last year, has their address changed since then? In this example, we're going to say no. And once we do so, you'll notice that that's it. That's all we have to enter on that form. Then we need to go to page 5. And on page 5 is going to be disbursement method. So how are they getting their refund? You know, is it going to be deposited into a different account? Do they want a paper check? How are they getting their refund back? For this example, we're just going to simply say they want to receive a refund by paper check. So now you can see all of our forms are completed. Everything is green except for our price sheet. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So there's different ways that you can charge for your returns, okay? A lot of people just go in and they put a flat amount right here on their 1040. And if that's the case, any other forms that's added is going to have the red marks, see? Because we have a Schedule C and we have 0, it's showing red. The reason it does this is it wants to make sure that you're aware, hey, you've added more forms that you don't have pricing for. So if you are charging just a flat fee here, you're going to have the price sheet become red, okay? And let's see, our page 5 turned red again. Let's see what else it's requiring. Do you want to authorize the Georgia Department of Revenue to discuss the tax return with the preparer below? Say, no, we don't. We're going to say no. So again, to your price sheet, if you're charging a flat fee, it will be listed and you'll have red on it. If you've come in and you've entered in charges for every form, then your price sheet will be green. Now, one of the things we do like to show you here is you can put in your amount here, but you know when you're filing returns with us, we charge $15. That's it. No more other fees. If you go to somebody else, you're paying a lot of junk fees. Ours is a flat fee, $15 per return. So what we say that you to do is, in order to make sure that you're getting that from your taxpayer, is on the e-filing line, go ahead and put in that $15 fee. That way you're sure you're getting your fee back. Once you have completed your tax return, the next thing that you want to do is run diagnostics. And what diagnostics does is it looks at the tax return and it's going to make sure that everything is entered into the tax return that's required for electronic filing purposes. Okay? But also in there, it looks at other things. It'll give you errors, it'll give you warnings, and it'll give you overridden entries. On this one, it says on the main information sheet, we have a bank marked, but we have it set to just an e-file. That's a problem. We can't create our e-file with an error. Warnings and overridden entries, we can. So you'll notice when I hover over that error, it's a link. So once I click on it, it'll actually take me to my main information sheet where I can go in and make the change, get rid of that error so we can electronically file it. So you see I have it marked to an e-file, but I have EPS marked. Well, the program knows that that's a problem. So I simply remove that. And once I run diagnostics again, this time you'll see my error's gone and I now have the ability to create the electronic file. So I'll click on create the e-file. Now it's a two-step process. Inside the tax return, you'll click create e-file and it creates it, but it hasn't sent it anywhere yet. So to send it, you would actually have to go out and click on the e-filing tab to send it. But before we exit the return, you're wrapping up the return. You want to go ahead and print out the return. You can do so from here. And this is the time too that you will want to select the client letter if they're going to have a client letter with the tax return. So to add the client letter, you simply select client letter. We have predefined ones that's already created for you in the program. You simply select which one you need, or if you've created custom client letters, you can select that as well. So once you've printed out your tax return, you want to come in here, select the client letter that you want. We know this is going to be a refund. So we want to select our 1040 refund letter. Once we do that, we can click print letter. Our tax return's printed already, so your letter prints, so the client letter lands right on top of it. So you're ready to hand that bundle to your taxpayer. Now to electronically file it, we'll simply click on the e-filing tab, and to submit it, we would simply click on submit e-files. It'll display any returns that are ready to be electronically filed. And one of the things that I do like to note here is if there is a state involved, you'll notice that there's nothing going for the state yet. The only thing that you can send first is the federal. The federal has to get accepted before you can transmit the state return. So select the return you need to submit and click on submit. But I am in a live version, so I'm not going to do that. But that wraps up our intermediate tax prep webinar. So Alexis, do we have any questions?
Hey, Ellen, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, perfect. So we do have a couple of questions that came in. We did get requests for a couple of future videos, such as a 1099 depreciation, things like that. Now, we did get a question, and I don't know if you're going to have time to do it right now. How would Section 179 expenses be applied to that tax return?
That would be something I would have to get with them offline and talk about. But if you give me that name and his name or their name and number, I'll be more than glad to get back with them. And when we'll do, that's kind of more of an advanced tax return. So we'll get into that too when we actually cover advanced returns in the webinar for advanced returns, if that makes sense.
Perfect. Yeah, most of these seem to be pretty specific and probably will be covered in future webinars. Let's see. We did get a question about defaulting the prices. That'll be done under your tax form templates. So you'll go ahead and do that. If you need help doing that, please give us a call.
And we do webinars each week on admin setup. This week we have one on Thursday, and we'll be covering the defaults for the TWO program. And then the following week, we'll be talking about defaults in the desktop version as well. So.
All right. Other than that, it's looking like they're pretty specific questions. So if we didn't get to you today, either the topic's going to be covered in one of our coming webinars this week, or we'll reach out to you individually and get that information over to you.
Yeah, exactly. And some of the more complicated questions that you guys have, now keep in mind, this was just for intermediate tax returns. We will be getting into more advanced tax returns. I believe that webinar is going to be scheduled for next week as well. So if we didn't cover it in this one, you want to sign up for the advanced tax prep returns next week. And we will be getting that information out to you probably by the end of the week or the beginning of next week. But our webinars for the month of October are going to be Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we rotate the times. Either our beginning time will be 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. And again, we will get that broadcast out to everyone once we get them created. So with that said, we will go ahead and complete this session. And as always, thank you all for attending, and reach out to us if you have any questions. We're here and are willing and able and want to be able to assist you in any possible way we can. So thank you all for attending, and I hope you have a great day.